Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Fusion21 seminar. My name's Andrew Gray, and I'm the Member Relationships Manager at Fusion21, and I have the pleasure in chairing today's session. This is the second in a series of webinars we're running that focus on aspects of building safety and compliance. 2 weeks ago, we ran a session on firefighting lifts, and if you missed that session, along with any of our other sessions that we've been running since March, you can view them again by visiting our website www.fusion21.co.uk/news. Today's webinar focuses on emergency lighting and the potential benefits of upgrading existing systems to self-testing. First, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're new to these webinars, and hopefully probably by now you're not, but I'll just go through just in case you are. If you're wanting to reduce the size of the panel on the right hand side, you can click the orange button and therefore see more of the presentation and the speakers. If you're having any difficulties with the sound, you can adjust the audio settings by clicking on the orange button on the panel. But sometimes it may often be better to log in again. That's what we've often found on these webinars. But if you can't hear us, you can often do that, or if you type a message, a member of staff will hopefully get back to you and try and resolve any problems that you have. And with regard to questions, we do really want to hear from you, and if you are able, whilst you as the audience are on mute, we do want to hear from you, so please ask your questions using the question box again in the panel on the right hand side. So let's move on, and all of you are likely to be aware of the need to carry out routine tests of emergency lighting installations and how this can be labour intensive, difficult to manage, and therefore costly. This afternoon we will introduce the concept of self-testing emergency lighting and its benefits. We'll hear from a manufacturer who will provide some specific insights into the technical aspects of systems. That will be followed by a Fusion21 supplier who will set out the challenges around installation. And finally, one of our members will share their recent experience having made the decision to install a self-testing system. In the discussions, the panel will also discuss the best way to procure and install new lighting and the challenges that you may face. So without further ado, I'd like to move on and introduce today's panel. First to speak will be Phil Woodhead, who is Category Manager for Compliance at Fusion21. Phil will provide the introduction to the session and setting out the benefits of a self-testing system. Phil will be followed by another Phil Kett. Phil is Product Manager Controls at Glamox Luxonic, a leading manufacturer of self-testing systems. We then have another Phil Miller. Phil is Managing Director of Abca Systems, who are a Fusion21 supplier. And finally, you'll be pleased to hear not another Phil, but Chris Rutter. Chris is Contract and Compliance Manager at Silva Homes. So welcome to the panel. And now I'm quite happy to move on to Phil Woodhead, who will do his introduction. So welcome, Phil.
Great, thanks Andrew. My presentation today is a short introduction to self-testing emergency lighting. So for those of you familiar with emergency lights, what's different with a self-testing system. So I'll give you a flavour of that. I won't go into too much of the technicals. I should leave that for Phil K. But the other thing I want to do is set out the core business case for going down this road. Whatever sector you're in, whatever portfolios you manage, I think all of our members can benefit from this new technology. So next slide, please, Andrew. So in a nutshell, what is a self-testing site system? Well, you start off with lights. they look exactly the same as any other normal emergency light fitting or a combined fitting. You then have some infrastructure, so they can be wireless or wired, and connect those together and connect them to the internet. So typically on a site with lots of fittings, you might have Wi-Fi, you might have existing Ethernet connections. If you're in smaller sites, more remote sites, you might be on 4G. But essentially it's take a bunch of light fittings, connect them to the internet, and then on the right hand side there you'll see behind the scenes there's servers and things like that, but you get a dashboard with every single one of your emergency lights connected together. And in the benefits of that, I'll sort of come on to next, but it gives you features like, for example, you can see the status of lights, are they working, when were they last tested. If a fitting has a fault, it can phone home and send you an email, so that ET phone home. So if you've got, for example, a repairs at email address, if a light fails, the system will automatically log a repair ticket for an engineer to go and fix it or investigate that fault. But from a sort of more strategic asset management perspective, you also get that dashboard with every single fitting all under one roof. So that's the sort of principles of the system. There's lots of technical detail, different ways of doing all sorts of bits of protocols and things like that. But as an overview of what are we actually talking about, we're talking about some new light fittings connected to a controller, and behind the scenes probably a supplier running a server, giving you a web page that you can dial into. So it's not overly complicated, but there is some technical stuff behind that. Next please, slide, Andrew. So the core business case, I want to present sort of the three main benefits as I see them from Fusion21's perspective. There are other benefits, but if we take the first one there, and if you think about that slide before, where you've got your management information reporting dashboard, a key benefit is around the assurance of knowing that your light fittings are working. So emergency lighting forms part of means of escape. A typical regime, you go out once a month and test them, but in between times, those 30 or 29 of the days that you're not on site, the day after you visit, the light could stop working. In a self-testing system, if that happens, you know about it. So there is a difference here between being compliant and being safe. And compliance is we've done all the things that is expected of us in terms of regulatory requirements. Well, the law might be great, but as we have seen in other instances, that doesn't mean to say the building is safe. This gives you the peace of mind knowing that your light fittings are working. So that's sort of the first real benefit. And you can easily demonstrate that in an auditable, transparent way as part of internal audits or external audits to third party. You can instantly show every single fitting. So that's sort of primary benefit number one. Number two links to that, which is if a light fitting fails and it doesn't phone home, it falls off the grid, or it flags a fault, or it doesn't test for the 3 hours that it should test, it will flag that in a report. So you can have a dashboard that shows the light fittings that are working and the ones that aren't. And again, you can see that they're being repaired. When did they fall off the grid? When did they break? And so that process efficiency of a light fitting, phoning home, reporting a problem before a resident or a building occupier even realizes that there's a problem. So you've got fewer phone calls, you've got better service, it's more efficient, and you can design your business processes around that. So, if it fails the day after the engineer's tested it, then for 3 weeks that fitting might not work and nobody might realise it, or nobody might report it, or you're depending on someone reporting that, and so the extra process time involved, well, where is it? Well, I don't know, versus the light fitting that you know exactly which fitting is, which building, and the minute that it failed. And the third benefit we will sort of go on to look at in the next slide is about payback. The business case around self-testing lights is fairly compelling, and that's what I want to show you next. So next slide please, Andrew. So here is an example, and these systems traditionally have come from single sites with lots of light fittings. So if you think of a hospital or a school, and this example is to try and maybe put that into a different context to say, well, think of an example where you might have smaller buildings but lots of them. and we've done some work with a police force recently who've installed self-testing emergency lights, and that's another application where it's not one single site, it's multiple sites. So the example here is a bit contrived and your numbers may vary. What I've tried to do is be sort of transparent in those calculations, and your mileage may vary. So, and again, what I've tried to illustrate is the direct costs. So we don't look at management costs, we don't look at call center time, transaction costs, we don't look at satisfaction for end users. We're really looking out now is sort of the payback model here. So on the left-hand column is a traditional light fitting. So if you can imagine a compact fluorescent light with a tube and a ballast, a battery, it's probably quite a cheap battery. It's probably a 30 quid fitting from Screwfix, or Eddie's, or wherever else your fittings have come from. So yes, your initial capital cost there is relatively cheap, and the assumption here, you'll see it says renew battery 6 times, is over this 5 years. The assumption is probably once over that 5 years, each of those fittings will need its battery changing. The middle section there looks at testing. So you can see the British standard says go and do 11 monthly simulated failures, and then once a year do a 3-hour discharge. So what's the cost to go and do all of that over 5 years? If you compare that with the right-hand side, yeah, capital cost is slightly higher. You've got some more technology, you've got some controllers in there, but your testing cost moves from being 12 visits a year to a single visual-only visit. Similarly, the repair cost, and I think this isn't unique to self-testing emergency lights, but if you're going to install new technology, you're probably going to be looking at LEDs. So LED lights typically have a longer lamp life. With an LED technology, you don't have a ballast. And we would recommend that you look at newer battery chemistries. So your typical traditional battery will fail or need replacing after 2 or 3 years. If you go for a longer battery, you can buy batteries now that last 6-7 years that are guaranteed. It means that over the whole life cost, if the battery costs you, for example, £15, yes, but it might cost you £30 for an engineer to go and replace that battery. So by not having to do those repairs, your capital cost is higher, but you will save more money. So if we take that whole scenario, and there are other variables in here, have you got to recable the building to do it, or do you choose a wireless system? Are there some energy savings in electricity costs in moving to LED lamps? So those sort of things I would say are the fringe benefits. But the core of it is this. I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. There are organisations out there that will not be doing 11 monthly tests, and the environment around fire safety, I think those people that haven't previously been doing them will start doing them, and you will see the significant cost in labour in going to do those emergency lighting tests. If you have been doing them, you're already standing that cost, and there's a real opportunity in the saving. So if you looked at this very simple illustration and you times up and say, well, what if you didn't have one building? If you had 500 buildings, over this 5-year period, you stand to save £400,000. There's many FDs that would kick themselves to think, wow, I could save £400,000. Now do that over a 30-year business plan, and you're into some serious money. So there is a really compelling case to do this. So next slide, please, Andrew. Just to wrap up my part of this is really to sort of present some procurement considerations for you to think about. So if you're thinking about, I'd love to save £400,000 or even £200,000, great, it's a no-brainer, why wouldn't we do it? Just some things to think about. So first thing, if you're looking to install these systems, some of those messages coming out of Grenfell, but they pre-exist, those messages are in CDM as well. So who is it that's doing the work? So we would certainly recommend that you're looking at accreditations. So a good example that might be BAFE SP203 Part 4, which is for emergency lighting installation. Obviously these are electrical things, so looking for electrical competent person accreditations as well. There is an aspect to competency, so is the experience element of that. So to look at your particular installer or installers and sort of look at what backup do they have with the particular manufacturer and what experience do they have in these technologies. So there is some certification processes around emergency lighting, but they're well within the regions of most electrical remit of most electrical contractors. So there is a piece there in competency, but I wouldn't want to overstate that piece. If they can install normal emergency lights, my opinion would be, do you know what, I don't see any reason with some manufacturer support they couldn't install a self-testing system. Second bullet point here is around the public contract regulations. And obviously, Fusion21 works within the public sector. In procurement terms, we're regulated. And there's a key piece here, which is around the process for how you choose a particular system. So, Fusion21, our staff are 6 qualified, and our project managers are all the time thinking, how do we get the best value for our members, and how do we achieve the outcomes? And here is a particular thing just to bring to your attention, and it's about how you choose a system. So you could go out there and just go and see some system and say, I like that one, that's what we'll have. But the danger that you run into is you're falling foul of the principles and the regulations within the public contract regulations. So we would probably advocate running a competition in 2 parts. We've done these before. So part of that procurement exercise is choosing the installer, and the other part is choosing a particular system. So rather than specifying a particular system, you're specifying your outputs and requirements. These are the things that we require, and you're letting the bidders, the contractors, specify the particular system. In many cases, we've allowed variant bids where you might even propose a system, say, look, we like this one, we think it meets our needs, but we're open to alternative variant proposals from contractors that will do the same thing. And in the past has been very successful in making sure that you get the best system that meets your requirements and at the right price as well. I should also say, in terms of today's presentation, we try to keep that very vendor neutral. Clearly we've got Phil Kett here today, and thank you, Phil, for agreeing to come and join us. From our perspective, we have done other systems, so we've used P4 with Police Force. There's other systems out there, Thorlux, Clevertronics, Comulite. There's quite a number, and I think that leads me on to probably some of the other considerations in procurement. So you are ultimately buying a system that's going to last for 15, and you might hope 20 years. And so this isn't a small investment if you go and replace all the emergency lighting fittings. So choosing the right systems particularly important. You've got to think about the change in technology over time. So these things are going to be sat on the internet and talking to your servers. So what might happen over 15 years? I mean, let's be honest, emergency lights don't fit forever. Technology doesn't last forever. So it's not a 30-year decision, but you do need to have the thing in your mind is you can't just go and change manufacturer tomorrow. All your fittings are talking to the same system. So how does that work for you over the next 15 years? To be honest, I haven't actually checked the CIBSI guide for life cycle periods on emergency lights. Is actually my copy is sat in the office. But if we work on 15 years, you get the principle of that. There's a particular point around some of the technical stuff, and that is around the compatibility. So some of these systems work on what are called closed protocol. A manufacturer has designed its light fittings to talk to its controllers, and nobody else can really work with that. So you are buying into a closed system. There is an open standard out there called DALI, and I think Phil will cover very, very briefly in his next presentation. DALI is a very established protocol. It's been working for quite a long time. But what you have to think about with an open protocol is, will manufacturers A equipment operate and work with manufacturers B? And I think the other thing to consider with DALI is the protocol is very much designed around, let's say, lighting control scenes and things like that, building automation. It wasn't specifically designed for emergency lighting testing. It was sort of like a secondary part to the standard. So how well does everybody implement that standard? So I think with the closed protocol system, you get the benefit that everything will work together and will be risk-free in that respect. On the other hand, if you're buying components from different manufacturers, will it work together, and will they all be blaming each other around why something doesn't work or where the fault lies? So pros and cons of both, but it's something to be aware of. And the final point on there is cyber security. These things are going to sit on the internet. We've seen plenty of stories in the news of systems where the NHS has had everything encrypted and being held to ransom. imagine someone takes over your self-testing emergency lights and suddenly you've got no means of escaping out of your buildings. That's a rather severe problem. So certainly the message for me as part of a procure exercise is to do your due diligence on the manufacturer as well as on the installer. So will the manufacturer be there in 10 years' time, and what are they doing in terms of cyber security? So one of the badges there you'll see on the right hand side is Cyber Essentials. That's a relatively new government scheme, it's 2 or 3 years old now, but is an indicator of competency around IT security. So just something to keep in mind. So next slide, please, Andrew. I think this is over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we've got a sort of series of questions, and do please keep your questions coming in. And just in terms of we have had a couple of questions. So before I move on, I'm going to ask the panel the question on the screen, which is about, again, Phil talked about the increased capital costs of self-testing system versus traditional fittings. I just wondered if some of the other panel might sort of share their views on how organisations might go about reducing costs. So Phil K, and I should have said at the beginning, Phil unfortunately has had a little technical problem, and so you can't see Phil. But hopefully you'll be able to hear Phil in a minute. So Phil, would you like to kick off with this question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think testing has helped reduce costs over conventional key testing from the point of view that it's less of a physical regime behind having to go around and record all the data. So actually the way to see the cost advantage of using self-test emergency lights is to compare it against the maintenance costs ongoing against key test, which will always be higher from a labour point of view.
Yeah. Okay. Phil Miller.
Yeah, for me, the main thing is making sure you get your design up front done correctly by a competent person. There's quite a lot involved in emergency lighting design, and work with a contractor that's accredited to do that, and also involve the manufacturer as well. You have to really look at that, what the lights can do and what their coverage is, to make sure you're not either overcooking it or undercooking, what you need. So yeah, for me, it's just make sure you've got a competent, either a designer that's separate to a contractor, or a competent contractor up front that knows what they're doing on the design of it.
Okay, and finally, Chris, can you share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's taking into account the whole life cost of not just the capital equipment, but that testing. And the exercise that we looked at, we're got to install in about 100 new systems in about 115 blocks. And our internal DLO do that testing on a monthly basis for us at the moment. And in conversations with them, it was capacity to do those tests. We'd have to take on another person to do it. So realistically, the self-testing and more importantly, the self-reporting element of the system is the biggest thing to encounter. But it is definitely look at the whole life cost, and I would say also look at the warranty term that you're going to have with this system, which you may be able to increase that initial calculation away from perhaps 5 years to 7 years.
Okay, then just one of the other questions, just quickly for the panel before we move on, and I think that the question is about are we able to have our design and commissioning engineers trained on your system? I suppose it's then any system, so they can deliver design, install, and commissioning with an in-house resource, or is that something that you wouldn't recommend? Let Phil Miller, would you like to comment on that first? Phil's on mute.
Sorry about that. I'll be on mute there. Yeah, so I guess multiple different, we work with multiple different manufacturers, and we're trained on particular manufacturers' equipment. Not only do you need to make sure you're competent with the standards and the regulations that you're governed by, but also then you do need to make sure you're competent on the equipment that you're installing. Especially when it gets to IT, it may need somebody a bit more specialist in theory than a standard electrician. So doing that training is necessary, and obviously that's up to the manufacturers. I think majority of manufacturers are quite open to training people, whether that's contractors like us or in-house DLO or however it works. It's definitely recommended for me that you go on as much training as you can with the manufacturers that you're installing.
Yeah, so Phil Kett, do you want to come in there? And also another question, which again probably relating to you, is closed protocol normally has local authorities heading for the hills. How is these systems going down?
Absolutely. Well, firstly on the training side of it, we're as a business very happy to do training with the client or with the facilities company that are looking after the system. Before handover, we would always encourage a client training session to hand the system over and go through the use of it, and then we can provide detailed instructions if required, and telephone support and remote diagnostics are also possible as well. So from a support side of things, we've got it all covered, and we want to hand as much ownership of the system over as we possibly can. We only want to be involved really when you need us. With that said, and on open and closed protocols, the systems, it's software, so there's a certain element of all systems that is bespoke software by that specific to that manufacturer. But in terms of protocols, DALI being a standard protocol, we have got the assurances that you can pick any DALI luminaire and it will work on a DALI network. So from that side of things, you have got complete peace of mind that you can work with several lighting companies to achieve your emergency lighting solution and have it monitored by one system. From a point of view of grey areas of responsibility, there is always benefits to sticking with a single supplier, because if the supplier of the lighting has supplied the controls, if there's a problem, there's one company and they'll deal with it. Whereas you can end up in a situation sometimes where manufacturers will disagree and maybe blame each other. So we would recommend trying to avoid that where possible. But typically, we're very open and happy to train people. So closed or open, I think, is less important when we're talking about emergency monitoring.
Okay. If I can just jump in there, Andrew, again, I think the main issue with closed protocol is when you've got a manufacturer that's an installer and only does it themselves. That's when you get the real issues for the end user, if you want, where you've got they're doing the manufacturing, they're doing the install, and nobody else can get trained in their products. When you've got something, when you've got a manufacturer that's open to training whoever it is that wants to be trained and is going to invest that time to do it, then that protocol becomes less of an issue, because they're not trying to make money from the maintenance side of it as well.
Okay, that's great. I'm gonna move on. Please, audience, do keep your questions coming through, and we will try and address them later on. But I'm conscious of time. So, Phil Kett, could you take us through your presentation, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Phil Kett. I'm the product manager for lighting controls in the UK for the Glamox group. So if you'd like to move on to the next slide for me, please, Andrew. So you may not have heard of Glamox, and you may or may not have heard of Luxonic, but a very quick story for you. We joined forces about 12 months ago, and we've had a program of joining forces over the last year. So now we're bigger and stronger than we ever were before, and we have combined between both companies. We have 94 years of experience serving the UK market. So we're very focused on commercial, industrial, logistical, education, healthcare sectors. So it's all commercial lighting. As far as residential goes, we don't do domestic fittings, but we can put fittings in corridors and stair calls and things like that. So we have still got answers for all applications really. But we work on solutions. We're a solutions company rather than a company promoting and selling products as such. And we have a worldwide network of manufacturing facilities. We operate in over 60 countries worldwide, over 2,400 employees. Last year's total revenue as a business was 292 million. Everything these days is all based on state-of-the-art LED lighting. We're not really selling fluorescent anymore. We supply lighting controls, well, let's move on to the next slide. I don't want to labour that too much. Thanks, Andrew. So emergency lighting. Escape lighting is really there to provide a safe route to exit the building. The lighting needs to be tested and maintained regularly. And under the legal side of things, the most senior person in the building is responsible for the emergency lighting in that building, i.e. if a building inspector was to arrive and find half the lighting had failed and hadn't been maintained, the most senior person working that day in that building would be the person bearing the brunt of the standards. So it's something to be taken very seriously. And we know that the testing requirements and the log for that testing requirements is to carry out a monthly function test and a yearly duration test. And there's several ways of doing that. And if we go to the next slide, we'll look at the most basic and standard way. Oh, in fact, we won't. It's on the slide after. So there are a number of options available, starting with key testers in the most basic form of turning the power off to the emergency lights and watching the batteries illuminate them. Then we self-test, which we've already learned a little bit about through Phil's presentation. And then I'd like to tell you a bit more about how we do central reporting and centrally monitored solutions. Thank you, Andrew. So firstly, with key test, this is the probably the old favourite. There's a lot of buildings with these fish keys and manual testing. The problem with this is it's very labour intensive in that you know, someone has to physically flick the key test and then they need to do a visual walk right the way around the building, logging and noting exactly what every emergency light is doing. And this needs to be carried out monthly. And then annually, there is the requirement to turn the lights on and let them run for the full 3 hours, inspecting them and making sure that they all last that 3 hour duration. So it does cost a lot. It is very labour intensive. And if we go to the next slide, I can start talking about how that can be made better. Excuse me. So self-test. This is what I would call a good solution. You know, it's in its most basic form, a self-test inverter, which is the part inside the emergency light that sort of manages this process. It will manage itself, if you like. It will on a weekly, every 7 days, it will do a function test, and every 12 months it will do a duration test. But when it's not connected to anything else, it will just do this on a built-in time clock, but it doesn't know a specific time or date. And so this testing can be relatively random around your building. And in sensitive areas, we've certainly had reports of or complaints from cinemas when emergency lights come on during the middle of a screening. So whilst it's certainly saving you the need to flick the key test and walk around to view all the lights while they're working under battery condition, this now allows you to simply walk around on a monthly basis and record whether the status indicator is displaying green for good or red for a fault. And if it is displaying red for a fault, it's clever in that based on the flash rate, you can tell if you have a battery failure or a charging failure. So you do get some actual feedback from these self-test luminaires as well. So that's the long and short of self-test in its most basic form. There is still a labour cost associated with that in terms of the monthly walk round and visual check of the status lights. And if we move to the next slide, Andrew. So here we look at central reporting, and this ultimately removes the need to walk around and inspect the status indicators of your self-test luminaire. So this first solution, wireless solution, in that each emergency luminaire would have a built-in wireless transceiver, and that would enable them to report their status back to your handheld tablet when you want to see what your emergency lighting is doing at any given time. Now, it's important here to identify that this is reporting rather than monitoring. So the reporting means that when you go on the tablet and ask it to generate the report, at that moment, it will go around all the self-test luminaires and ask them what their current status is, and they will all report back. So you will know that everything has either passed or failed a function test within the last 7 days of you asking for that report. But you still physically have to go and generate that report from the system. We can take it further and automate the process, but in its most basic format, this is a manual check of field report. But what it does remove is the need to walk around the building. And when it does report a fault, it will tell you what the fault is, whether it's a charge fault or a battery fault. Okay, thanks, Andrew. We can move on. And then here you can see, so sorry, back one, we've got a pop up. There we are, and then here you can see, so where we identify an emergency light on the graphical overview of the floor area, we can then see the lamp status, the battery status, and the charge indication. So this is two-way feedback from the luminaires back to the tablet. Thanks, Andrew. So to take it one step further and to automate this to the point that you don't need to remember to do anything, there are DALI systems now that will do building-wide monitoring. A lot of modern systems, as Phil mentioned earlier, would like to control your lighting as well as do the emergency monitoring. Often this is an additional feature that you're going to have with a lighting control system. So, you know, why not benefit from it? So all it requires is a DALI inverter, and quite often if it's self-test, it will be a DALI inverter. You do then need to install a DALI pair around all the luminaires and often back to a riser, which would connect back to a head PC. But this will then give you real-time feedback from the DALI emergency luminaires, and in the same way as wireless, it can be displayed on a graphical overview or a front end. So in terms of testing, the system can be programmed to run the tests automatically. You can do that on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis, or based on duration and function testing. And it can be programmed so that you will automatically receive a text message or an email as soon as the fault has been recorded, enabling you to maintain that. So based on that this is probably what we would refer to as your best solution in terms of it probably needs the least amount of human interaction with it. And it stores all your test data and logs for the building as well. Something else to just highlight briefly is because we get this feedback and we know whether we've got charging failures or lamp failures or battery failures in our reports, from a maintenance point of view, there's a saving there as well, because it does mean that the chap who goes up to inspect the fitting and get it back online and working again is probably only going to make one visit, because he already knows what the fault is before he's even got up to the fitting in the ceiling and inspected it. So there's some real advantages of having that two-way feedback from the luminaire back to whichever system you're using to view that on. Okay, thank you, Andrew. So really, just to summarise, key test is slow, a bit old-fashioned, and obviously very labour-intensive. Self-test luminaires certainly remove the need to witness the function duration testing. Central reporting removes the need to keep walking around the floor and logging all those indicator lights. And central monitoring gives you that peace of mind that no matter what, the testing will happen on time every time, and there's no risk of human error. So I'm open to questions if anybody wanted to ask me anything.
Okay, thanks, Phil. There are a couple of questions, though I do think that you've probably answered them, but I'll just double check by just running through them briefly. So can the self-testing be done using current ITC packages? So I assume it can be integrated into existing ITC packages.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of integration, we can provide all the data from any system we do the monitoring through to link in with the BMS or any kind of central reporting. Or I know a lot of sort of end user clients with multiple sites like to have a dashboard where they're able to see multiple sites on one screen. So when we're in that situation, we've got the benefit of cloud servers and be able to report through web portals, i.e. you could actually log on and view your system from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and do you have a view on how many hours can be saved through self-testing?
It would really depend on how many luminaires you have and how big your building is. You know, I did carry out some cost analysis some time ago now, but we thought it was about £70 a point in terms of key test from a labour point of view. We felt that would reduce to £50 a point with a monitored self-test solution, and could further savings at that time. I was also able to talk about central batteries, and we felt that there were further savings when you were able to take batteries away from fittings as well.
Okay, another question that just come in, how much data is transmitted, and would GPRS dialer using SIM card technology be capable of transmitting this data?
Yes, so it's not a great amount of data. On the wireless, the data is only sent when it's asked for. On a DALI building-wide system, the data is only sent at the programmed scheduling times for the testing. In terms of security and how we get it out of a building, we can connect our systems into a client network, and it can be accessed that way. And then we've got the benefit of the client's network security as well. Or for remote applications, we can provide, certainly on wireless, a 3G mobile data card that will plug in and allow the system to be online, but independent of anything in the building.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks very much for that. I'm gonna move on to Phil Miller now. So, Phil, welcome again, audience. Please keep your questions coming in, and we'll answer them as we go along. So, over to you, Phil.
Okay, so just a little bit about Abca to start with. We're a nationwide specialist electrical contractor. Fire and security, emergency lighting, and communication systems are the three kind of areas we specialise in. We've got 4 branches up and down the country: Newcastle, Manchester, Cambridge, and London. Certifications we have that are relevant to this, to the install and maintenance of emergency lighting is we're BAFE accredited, SP203-4. We're an ICE as well. We're also FireAS accredited for fire stopping and doors as well. We run a full integrated management system. We've also got SSIP accreditations, as you can see there. Resources that we've got directly employed that work on these systems are there below as well. So that just gives you a flavour of who we are and what we do as a company. Next slide, please. I've been asked to kind of discuss the install side of it. The main thing, I've split it into 3 sections. The install planning side is first, and for me, and you'll see this theme across the whole thing, it's the communication that's key at all stages. Up front, getting the correct asset data from you guys, from the clients ultimately, whether that's by pre-tender surveys from an appointed consultant, or it's something you have already. The more detail we have, the better. That allows us to mitigate risk for you through getting a fixed cost if we've got that data right up front. It allows that to happen. Obviously, once the orders are placed and we get on site, we then conduct the full site detailed surveys. That's with the project managers, our lead engineers, and the client as well. And we build up a documented process so we all understand where we're coming from and from those surveys. On the program planning side, we always look at kind of the labour that's allowed and apply a slippage time, for the want of a better word, to it. It's you anticipate it being slightly longer than it is. On the purchasing side, we work directly with manufacturers and distributors. As I said, on the design as well, we'll work with them. The more input you can get from them, the better. Make sure it's going to perform how we expect it to. Up front as well, liaison is quite important. Obviously, well, tenant or client representatives, because there'll be some office people that work in different places, but some making sure there's a dedicated person on our side for people to speak to from the site. We have for residents particularly, we have a text facility that people can text in and request communication on. We've also used digital notice boards, which are quite good for the social housing sector, and you can actually move them between sites and put information about what's happening when on the particular sites. We always use co-branded communication to residents as well, and also provide samples on the site so they understand what they're going to get, how it's going to look prior to actually doing it. One of the big things with install planning for us as well is the induction process for our guys on site. You know, you see a lot of contractors going out there and just sending the engineers to site and saying, off you go, you know, have at it, there's the install plans. But we actually, if you spend time on the induction of those engineers and project managers that are going to be working on the site, make sure everyone's got the same buy-in and understands what the project is, what the end goal is, it really smooths that process. And then the other one is handover expectations, putting out at the beginning what you're going to receive at the end, i.e. you're going to get certificate A, B, C, and D at the end. If you set that out at the beginning, it means when it comes to the end, you know what you're going to be getting certification and handover wise. Next slide, please. So I'm on to install execution. You know, again, the message being it, communication is key. You know, our engineers on the floor, they're obviously key to what's going on there. And we train them to act as if it's their own property. And we understand where your representatives on site, and we take the time to liaise with the people on site, the stakeholders that are necessary. Engagement on site, talking to the clients and the residents as well, knowing to let them know what's going on at each stage of it. Don't just plow into it. You know, we take that time there. I think from our side as well. But look, you know, you could report. I guess you could report whatever you want, but for us, it's being clear and honest with where you're at what stage of the project. If you have issues, if there's something that comes up that you didn't expect, we're open and honest about that. The auditing side as well, a big thing on the auditing of it, you know, whether it's health and safety or quality, people kind of think, oh, I'll go and do one health and safety audit or one quality audit. And it's more than that. You need everybody, again, kind of goes with the planning side of it. You need everybody's buy-in on it and everyone to be involved. So daily we're checking health and safety, daily or hourly it's quality, hourly it's, you know, and it's documented as you go along, not just done at the end. So you've got that whole QA check process and health and safety process throughout it. And the other thing kind of going hand in hand with the TLO that we mentioned before, the tenant liaison or client liaison, is the office tracking of it, not just leaving the engineers on their own on the site to go ahead and do the work. It's getting reports back daily of what's going on, if there's any issues, what we need to change, what we need to order, how we need to react to that. Again, just emphasizing that communication, not only between us and the clients or the tenants, also to internally to our back office as well. Next slide, please. On the handover side, you know, fully documented, making sure, again, I've said that communication is key, making sure it's fully documented. We give you what we've told you we're going to give you from the outset. It's in an electronic format, so it's storable for you guys, as well as stored for service engineers after the fact. The worst thing as a service engineer is turning up to a site and not having the as fits or the certification of what's gone on there. The client involvement, again, with the handover process, you know, we want you guys involved, we want our clients involved with what's going on at handover, so we can give you the good demonstrations and show you. We understand there's different levels of demonstrations as well. You know, your IT guys might want to know about the networking side of it, the users will want to know this side of it. And we often find the best way of doing that is recording them, whether that's via something like this or whether it's an actual video camera on site or normally a smartphone on site. That's a very good way of documenting the training and documenting how to use it and giving it to you guys to use for years to come if somebody new comes in. The asset record side of it as well, obviously with the self-testing scenario, there's going to be a constant asset check on there, but there's newer technology coming out that allows you to kind of record the assets, and you guys control what's there by using QR codes. So you've got light A with QR code A, so it can show that you've checked it, etc. And I know we're talking about self-testing emergency lights here as well, but that, you know, this goes into the older stuff that you guys have as well. There's technology out there to allow you to record those assets and track them as you go along. The auditing side of it, with regards to the handover, you know, I've said throughout we'll be doing audits, but we're always, and obviously we're governed by our accreditations, we're always do a post-completion internal audit, and that's paperwork and the quality of what's gone in on the site as well, to make sure that what we're saying we're delivering from the outset is what's actually delivered on site. Obviously, with handover as well, we want to know that you guys are satisfied, that your residents are satisfied. There's customer satisfaction surveys done, and again, communicate with them through the TLO via text or whatever the best facility is. And then in general, internally as well, and we often do this with the client, kind of have a lessons learned after the fact. Again, you know, the idea of communication is key. You sit down with the client, what worked for you during that install, what didn't work, and we're always continuously improving throughout the process. Normally these type of installs are, you know, you do one and you roll on to the next ones, and you really learn and you hone your processes by working together as a team. So that, for me, again, go back to that communication thing. As the installers and maintainers of it, communication is key, and being upfront with what's happening, what's going on site throughout the whole process. Okay.
Excellent, thank you very much. So just a couple of questions that have come in. I'll sort of put to you first. Would you recommend using a lighting design consultant that has no interest in the or, you know, no financial interest in the outcome? And that would be one. And also I'll ask Phil W, because I know you sort of raised that in part of your presentation as well. But Phil Miller first.
Yes, I would, because that creates a clear level from which to work from, and it normally gets you best value. If you spend that time to get somebody to come in and do a lighting design for you, based on, you normally have to base the lighting design on a particular manufacturer or particular few manufacturers. But yes, I would definitely recommend that from a budget point of view. You know, when we've got a clear upfront, this is what you need to provide, it definitely allows you to give best value there.
Yeah. Phil?
Sure. I think from my perspective, it's clear there needs to be a design, and it needs to be clear who's responsible for that design. Not all buildings are of the same complexity. So, you know, a simple building with a staircase and 6 lights possibly doesn't need an independent designer to do that, or you could do a model archetype design and roll that out. And I think in those sorts of things, many manufacturers are common, they're quite comfortable to do design work for free on the basis that you're going to use their system. So I don't think, from my perspective, it's one size fits all. You know, if a member came to us with a particular project requirement, we'd have to understand that a bit more before probably saying yes, no, do, don't. We do have a consultants framework with those sorts of things, but ultimately, you know, from my perspective, the people actually doing the work, the installers, the Phil Miller and the Abcas of this world, ultimately they have designers they're working with, either directly employed or that they regularly use, and that communication, that path, does mean that actually that's quite a good place to do it. Also, do you want to do that design work up front and incur the costs almost before you go to tender? So I do want to echo something Phil said there about asset data and giving contractors, when they're pricing projects, as much information as you can, whether that's from desktop records, O&M manuals, even the number of, you know, square meterage or whatever it might be. As much information you can give will help them to improve or take risk out of the process for the contractor, and risk equals price. So the more information you can give, the best price that you will get. So yeah.
Okay, I'm sort of conscious of time, so I'm gonna skip next week, and I'll maybe come back to that. I'm going to move on to and introduce Chris Rutter to you to talk about some of the practicalities of as an organisation that's gone through this process. So over to you, Chris.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Silva Homes, who are a reasonably sized housing association in Berkshire. We currently have 121 buildings that have existing emergency lighting systems in them. A lot of these are very old and non-LED, and been updated and patched up as we go. And we currently have our direct labour organisation going out and doing those monthly VLIC tests. We go a little bit beyond the requirements of British Standard, in which we also do a 6-monthly 1-hour burn test on there. We were pretty clear that there were some additional buildings that required emergency lighting, and we are particularly lucky, I think, in the firm of fire risk assessors that we work with. We were able to brief them in to turn around and say to us when they go out. So quite often you'd get a fire risk assessor or assessment that would give you an action to say there's no emergency lighting and there should be. We've gone a little bit beyond that, and we built into the specification for the assessor to give us an estimate of how many luminaires would be required. And I can't tell you how much value that has added for us, because it allows us to do some budgeting and some forecasting for what the project was going to be. And whilst I'm sure Abca and other Fusion contractors and things wouldn't do, it enables us to have surety when we come back with designs that the right, we've got an indicative level of the numbers that we require, because we don't have the ability to go out and validate every single design and estimate to make sure that we've not got more luminaires than we need. So as part of this, we've identified another 115 blocks that require emergency lighting that have been added to our programme, which we've procured through Fusion21. If you can go on to the next slide for me, please, Andrew. So we looked at the actual cost that we get charged internally, and with the 3-hour burn tests and some of the additional allowances that we have to make for travel for some of our outlying blocks, we're looking at an average cost of £570 a year for us to test each building, and that is a big number to spend, and that, along with the increase in the number of volume, we're almost going to double the amount of testing that we're going to do. And we went to the internal team and said, we've got another 115 blocks that we need you to test, and it was like, whoa, panic. We struggle sometimes with resourcing doing the existing ones. We'll need to take on another one, if not 2 people, to do that. So it was an absolute no-brainer when we put the business case together that we look at self-testing, and this is probably a term that I've produced rather than the industry, but we've also wanted to look at something that was self-reporting. So we didn't want to go out and look at lights and things like that. We wanted a system that very clearly gave us a portal and gave us an alert that says, hello, the luminaire outside adjacent to flat 4 isn't working, please come out and change me. And that has enabled us to save that kind of money by doing it. So we are hoping that, we, other than the routine estate inspections that all of our buildings get that look at the condition of lights and things like that, we'll be losing that cost of testing, completely. So the cost benefit from us equated to £65,000 a year that we would save from testing that. And the new system that we've chosen comes with a 7-year warranty. And in speaking to our finance team, we worked out how we would, in effect, capitalise that sum for the project. And it's met 90% of the cost of doing the new blocks. And we anticipate that the life expectancy of these systems is going to be much more than 7 years. Yes, we'll probably have to change some luminaires and start changing some batteries from that, but everything has a 7-year warranty, including batteries. So we've got a very clear idea of what our long-term running costs are going to be. Where there is a little bit of saving that we've not yet realised is by having LED technology, what the cost on the service charge is going to be on the landlord power supply. So we know that it will be cheaper, but we've not just identified what that's going to be. But one of the things that we looked at when we wanted the new system wasn't just emergency lighting. So a lot of these blocks don't have communal lighting. They're very small little blocks of 9 flats, a lot of these. So we wanted to install a communal lighting system that also provided emergency lighting with a controller that kept the lights dimmed and then just pops on as people start walking up the stairs. But we've decided that we're going to keep the lights on at night at very low 10%, just a background illumination that ideally will hope deter some ASB and deter any other issues that that you tend to get with some blocks like this. I think the other benefits that we've had is working through Fusion. It was really good because they came up with a specification and they had a pre-market tested, supply chain that could install these. And so we've let a much wider electrical program that isn't just emergency lighting, it's also access control systems, EICR testing and some solar panel testing on other bits. And I think I've duplicated the bottom bullet points there from the other one. But the benefits really from us are the cost saving and absolute confidence that as the compliance manager, I can look and know and produce a weekly or monthly report for the exec and just say, yes, all of the luminaires are working. We've tested them all each month, and I haven't got any concerns of people not having tested it, not having reported it, haven't got a replacement luminaire on the van, and we've got to order one, and that luminaire's been out, for 2-3 days a week or something like that. And it is the confidence that we gain from having it. I think I'll say the Phil. So one of the Phils talked about the training requirements, and I think the training of the client in how to use and manage the portal that gives you that reporting, and working with a contractor that you know and trust, and getting them as part of that alert status. So that if we have a luminaire that goes down, our contractor will be getting an email as well as us to say that that's gone down. So we would expect them to be able to go out and replace that very quickly. But everyone in the business has just got that clarity of information. I haven't got to go hunting for updated spreadsheets or looking on housing management systems. I've just got that information at the press of a button. And I've got absolute evidence that if I ever need it, I can produce for the fire service or something like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. A couple of questions, and again, I may then also just include some of the other panel in this. Whether or not they're challenges from the audience, I don't know, but I'll be as I'll do chair's license to be a bit more provocative than perhaps the questioners. But one of it is around the savings in terms of if people are going out to the buildings anyway, are we being realistic about the actual cost savings that are being shown? There's then another question, which again, I think to some extent.
Sorry, can I answer that question very quickly? I can be absolutely confident that we are, because I get a bill, for those costs, and moving forward, I won't have a bill for those costs.
We see lots of organisations. Some people do their testing in house. Some people don't. But invariably, whether it's an arm's length contracting organisation that you own, or whether it's an external contractor, there is a cost. Time is money, and there is an art, and you can do emergency lighting very slickly, very organised, have really good record keeping, those systems, processes, management, all cost time and money. And the reality is, yes, the numbers I put out there in my earlier slide might be a bit contrived, but it's actually quite a quick payback period. You know, you can take that risk. Is it a true cost? And I would say, in my experience, very few organisations are that slick and that organised at doing it, that they're doing it in a way that's very auditable, and all the records are in place and all the tests are done, all collated into a board level report, summary, KPI in a really, really slick way that could do that in a way that's cheaper than going down this road. So I think, yes, you might look at some of the numbers here and think, is that realistic? I would definitely suggest people go and look at closer. It very much, there are real opportunities there. My slide said 45%. You know, even if it's 30%, you could not look at it, I don't think.
I think some of the challenges are around the fact that, you know, if you've got people going out doing regular in-state inspections, are they doing lighting as part of another? So you would still be doing those other inspections, and therefore you're actually not necessarily, whilst you may be saving specifically in relation to lighting, they are going out to these properties anyway, and therefore, you know, it's less of a it's the other one. Just move, go on.
No, I was just going to say, we do quite a bit of that already, and we've just done it on a particular customer where we've started to include the emergency light in. So we're doing weekly checks for somebody, and we've added a monthly check-in of a monthly flick test of the emergency light. And yes, it is more cost-effective than doing it as a, you know, standalone if you want, but there still is a cost there. You know, you've still got to have that person do that flick test, walk the building, and then you've got the 3-hour check. Once again, yeah, you could do multiple at the same time and go back to the first one at the start and make sure you're there. And definitely a cost there. It's just the value of that cost. That's the value of doing it. That's the difference.
Yeah, just going back to you, Chris. You didn't mention who your supplier was, and also there's been a question around the warranty. Is the 7-year warranty with the supplier or the installer?
So the warranty with us is with the supplier, the manufacturer, and we chose a slightly different system. We chose a system designed by Comulite, and I think the main difference there is that they have a centralized battery system as opposed to having individual batteries in individual luminaires. We already have a number of their systems within our buildings that probably aren't as, that don't do that. They do the self-testing, but they don't do the self-reporting. So the idea was to standardize that across the portfolio, and at the same time we'll upgrade those to the self-reporting system, but their particular system provides a 7-year warranty.
Yeah. Okay.
Doesn't cover if somebody, you know, from an ASB point of view, knocks it off the ceiling with a scaffold pole, but it will cover, you know, batteries and luminaires and things like that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Now, I'm conscious that we've run over time, but we still do seem to be keeping the audience. So thank you for allowing us to run over a little bit. But I'm gonna finish by asking the panel this sort of final question. If you had one piece of advice for someone thinking about installing self-testing lighting, what would it be? I'm going to start with you, Phil Kett.
Don't use a key switch. I believe you can really utilize automated systems to save yourself a lot of maintenance, as I think really all of the presenters today have highlighted on. You know, automated systems really are all about reducing costs, and you will find every manufacturer will be more than willing to sit down with you and go through a cost exercise and help you reach a point where you're satisfied that you've got a payback period, you know, within a defined amount of time. But the systems will certainly pay for themselves within a number of years.
Just one other very quick question: Are systems suitable for emergency lift lighting? Was one question, and then I'll perhaps Phil Miller, will you address that as in your final remarks?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a light that's in as long as you can get the internet cable to it or the signal to it, then yes, the network cable to it, then yes, it's fine in the lift, no problem at all. The one piece of advice I would give is make sure you've got an accredited contractor doing it. And by accredited, obviously I've talked about the emergency light and the BAFE and the NIC-EIC, but one thing that people often miss out is that the fire stopping that's required when you're doing new installs. That's why I had the fire ass accreditation, that we've actually got that in the past 2 or 3 years because of the fire stopping requirements, and it makes sure that as you go along doing the install can also fire stop as they go along to maintain that integrity.
Okay, excellent. Chris?
I think more than anything else, it is understanding your buildings and knowing what you need in a building. I think that some of these sorts of projects that I've done over the years with emergency lighting and similar things with sort of access control systems, it's, you know, knowing how many doors you've got, knowing how many luminaires you need, how many, you know, where they need to go from a, you know, a change of direction or stairwell lighting. Yeah, I think I can't stress enough just the more work we put in at the front end. And I think one of the things that we did when we went to tender is we went out to tender with the specification and the design for a typical installation in a couple of typical buildings. And we required, you know, a risk assessment, a method statement of how you're going to install it, a schematic, a survey, along with the cost. And I think that's going to be the bit that gives you the real clarity of what you need.
Okay, and finally, Phil W.
Great, thanks. I think from my perspective, it would be do some demos, look at different systems. There are lots of manufacturers. There are some good and there are some bad. Systems are all different. I think that key component, you know, if you have a distributed estate portfolio with lots of buildings, that central dashboard is essential to get some of the benefits out of the systems, and they don't all have that. So do have a look around.
Okay, that's excellent. So it just leaves me now to just wrap up, and hopefully you all agree that it's been a very enlightening and hopefully really useful session. If you'd like any further information about how we might help, please do get in touch. Usual numbers and email address on your screen. So all I want to do now is finally thank you, the panel, on behalf of the audience. I'm able to give you an actual round of applause. I'm sure they're all doing that sat at their offices or desks or wherever they are. No doubt someone will be outside enjoying this lovely weather. So a big thank you from me to all of the panel. We will be, if you haven't been able to access all of today's webinar, we will be producing it on our website in the next 24 hours, together with a copy of today's slides. We will also be running a further webinar in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to be on post-construction BIM, again part of our building safer properties series going forward. So all it leaves for me is to thank you for attending, thank once again our panel for their time, and look forward to seeing you all again. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.